A small garage, where poor people came hoping for honesty, but found only greed and lies. Against this injustice, a young mechanic raised his voice, risking his job and his future. What he didn't know was that every step was being watched by a hidden figure, and that man was none other than the true owner of the company, John Cena. And that's where a story begins, a story that changes everything. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe. There's another exciting one coming your way tomorrow. The sharp whine of an impact wrench cut through the air as Ethan Parker wiped the grease from his hands. At just 24, he was quick with a socket wrench, and even quicker to flare up when he caught a whiff of unfairness. His oil-stained shirt clung to him after a long shift at Hayes Auto Repair, a 6-bay garage that ran like a machine, churning through cars and customers. Ethan had worked here for 3 years, long enough to know this place didn't run on oil alone. It thrived on shortcuts, on squeezing every last dime from people who didn't know better. Across the shop, a silver sedan sat with its hood propped open like a patient on an operating table. Beside it stood an elderly man, probably in his 70s. His hands trembled as he clutched a worn leather wallet. His clothes were neat but thin, his shoes scarred from years of hard use. "I just need the belt replaced," he said softly but firmly. "It's not a big job. I can pay some today, the rest next week." Carl Hayes, the stocky manager with a permanent scowl, leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "That's not how it works, old man. We're not a charity. Pay in full, or take your rust bucket somewhere else." His tone was flat, final, practiced from years of running the shop like his personal kingdom. Ethan, tightening a bolt in the bay, felt his jaw clench. He'd seen this too many times. Carl turning people away if they couldn't pay up front, even for something as small as a belt. It wasn't right. Before he could stop himself, Ethan grabbed a rag, wiped his hands, and stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said, his voice cutting through the garage's hum. The old man turned, surprise flickering in his watery eyes. "Son, I don't want you getting in trouble because of me." Ethan shook his head. "It's a 15-minute job. Don't worry about it." Carl's face darkened. His brows knitted together. "Ethan, don't be stupid. You do this for free, you're paying for the part out of your own check." "Fine," Ethan shot back, meeting his glare without flinching. "Take it out of my check." Carl scoffed, the sound echoing against the concrete walls. "Your funeral, kid." But he didn't stop him. He knew Ethan was too stubborn to back down. And frankly, a $20 belt wasn't worth the fight. Ethan grabbed his tools. His hands moved with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times. Within minutes, the belt was in place, and the sedan's engine purred to life again. He straightened up, turning to the old man. "You're good to go." The man's eyes misted as he pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket. "Son, you didn't have to do that. It isn't much, but..." Ethan gently pushed the money back. "Just drive safe, all right?" The old man hesitated, then nodded, gratitude etched deep into the lines of his face. "Thank you." He climbed into the car and drove away, the taillights fading into the hazy afternoon. From the waiting area, a man watched silently. He wore a faded mechanic's uniform, his beard streaked with gray, his face carved by time. To everyone else, he was just another new hire, quiet, unremarkable. But this was no ordinary worker. This was John Cena, the elusive owner of the Hayes Auto Repair chain. For the past decade, he'd run his empire from afar, trusting it to manage itself. But lately, cracks had begun to show. Complaints of shoddy service, overpriced repairs, and a revolving door of employees. So John Cena had done something he'd never done before. He'd gone undercover, slipping into the shop under the name Jake Miller. To them, he was just another grease-stained face. But to him, this was his chance to see the truth. Arms crossed, he leaned back in his chair, watching Ethan. He'd been there all day, blending into the background. What he'd just seen wasn't some random act of kindness. It was a window into the rot festering inside his company. Ethan wasn't like the others. He didn't bow to Carl's rules or shrug off unfairness. He acted even when it cost him. John Cena's sharp eyes caught everything. The way Ethan's hands moved like they were born for this work, the way he stood his ground without hesitation. This kid was the real deal. And John Cena wasn't the only one who noticed. Behind the counter, Carl muttered about bleeding hearts and lost profits, still stewing. Ethan ignored him, calmly wiping down his tools. The tension between them hung heavy in the air, a silent promise of bigger clashes to come. John Cena stayed quiet, his mind already working. He'd come here to find out what was wrong with his shops. Instead, he'd stumbled onto someone like Ethan, a spark of honesty in a system built on lies. This wasn't about one belt or one old man. It was about the culture Carl had allowed to take root. A culture John Cena had been too distant to see. And now that he had seen it, he wasn't going to let it stand. Ethan tossed the rag onto his workbench and glanced at the clock. His shift wasn't over yet, but the day already felt heavier than usual. He didn't know it, but everything was about to change, and the man watching from the shadows would be the one to set it in motion. Sliding a creeper under the next car, Ethan let the squeak of its wheels against the concrete ground him. His hands still buzzed with the adrenaline of defiance after the standoff with Carl, but he buried the feeling beneath the rhythm of work. Loosen a bolt. Check a line. Keep moving. He wasn't naive. Helping that old man earlier would cost him more than just a few dollars from his paycheck. Carl never let things go. Ethan had painted a target on his own back. But if he had to do it again, he would. Because the alternative, watching someone get kicked aside over a lousy belt, was something he simply couldn't stomach. Across the garage, the man calling himself Jake Miller, John Cena in disguise, scribbled something on a clipboard, the gray in his beard catching the harsh fluorescent light. To the other mechanics, he was just another quiet rookie learning the ropes, blending into the chaos of clanging tools and revving engines. But John Cena's eyes were sharp, tracking every move. He'd seen the fire in Ethan, the way he'd stood up to Carl without a flicker of hesitation, and it stirred something in him. A mix of respect and unease. This wasn't the kind of shop he'd envisioned when he'd taken over the chain. He'd trusted managers like Carl to keep things running. Now, he wondered how much of that trust had been misplaced. The day dragged on, heavy with unspoken grudges. Ethan was tightening a lug nut when a black SUV rolled into the bay. Its driver, a woman in her mid-30s, stepped out with her fingers clenched tight around her keys. Her name was Sarah, though Ethan didn't know that yet. Nervous energy radiated off her as she glanced uneasily at the garage's grimy walls. Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and moved toward her before Carl could swoop in. "Something wrong with the car?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice light easy. She hesitated, twisting the keys in her hands. "It's making a weird noise when I turn. Like a groan." "Let me take a quick look," Ethan said, already popping the hood. He leaned in, listening as he turned the wheel. Sarah hovered nearby, her brow creased with worry. She didn't say it outright, but Ethan knew the look. He'd seen it too many times. She was someone who had been burned before, overcharged for work she didn't need. Before he could finish his inspection, Carl's shadow loomed over him. "Inspection's $80, lady." "Non-refundable," Carl barked, arms crossed, daring her to argue. Sarah's eyes widened. $80? Just to look at it? Her voice wavered in disbelief. "That's shop policy," Carl said with a shrug, his tone dripping with indifference. "Take it or leave it." Ethan straightened, a frown carving into his face. He didn't speak, at least not yet, but the heat building in his chest was hard to ignore. Sarah shifted, caught between fear and frustration, twisting the keys harder in her hands as she tried to decide. From the sidelines, John Cena's jaw tightened. He'd seen this script too many times before. Scare the customer, upsell the service, pocket the difference. It was Carl's game, played to perfection. And watching it unfold now made John Cena's stomach turn. I need to know what's wrong," Sarah finally said, her voice small but steady. "All right," Carl smirked, waving Ethan forward before swaggering back to the counter. Ethan swallowed the retort burning in his throat and focused on the SUV. A few minutes later, he stepped out, wiping his hands. "Your power steering fluid's low, that's what's causing the noise. I can top it off right now, takes just a minute." Sarah's shoulders sagged in relief. "Oh, thank God, that's all?" "Yeah," Ethan replied with a faint smile. "No big deal." He turned to grab a bottle of fluid, when Carl's voice sliced through the garage like a knife. "That'll be a full power steering flush. $150. Ethan spun, his patience snapping. "She doesn't need a flush, Carl. It's just a top-off." "Not your call," Carl said, stepping closer, arms still crossed. "We charge for the full service, or we don't do it. Shop rules." Sarah's relief evaporated, replaced by panic. I can't afford that," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Isn't there any other way?" "No discounts," Carl cut her off flatly. "You want it fixed, you pay." Ethan exhaled hard, fists clenching at his sides. The other mechanics froze mid-task, the air heavy with tension. From his corner, John Cena shifted, his comm mask beginning to crack as he watched Carl bully yet another customer. This wasn't just greed, it was cruelty. Ethan leaned closer to Sarah, lowering his voice but keeping it firm. "Go to the auto parts store down the street. Buy a bottle of power steering fluid. $5, tops. Pour it in yourself. That's all you need." Carl's face twisted, eyes narrowing into slits. "Are you serious right now, Parker? You trying to cost us money?" "I'm trying to be honest," Ethan shot back, his voice rising. "Something you wouldn't know anything about." The garage went dead silent. Carl loomed over Ethan, his bulk casting a shadow. "Honesty doesn't pay the bills, kid. Keep pulling stunts like this, and you won't be working here much longer." Ethan didn't flinch, his green eyes locked on Carl's. "Maybe I shouldn't be, if this is how you run things." Sarah slipped away quickly, mouthing a quiet thank you to Ethan as she fled the storm brewing behind her. Carl's glare followed her, then snapped back to Ethan. "You're on thin ice, Parker. Real thin." Slowly, John Cena rose to his feet, dusting his hands off, his heart pounding beneath the calm exterior. He had seen enough. Carl wasn't just a bad manager. He was a predator, feeding on desperation and crushing anyone who dared to care. And Ethan? Ethan was fighting a war he couldn't win alone. A war John Cena had allowed to grow by staying in the shadows too long. The guilt pressed sharp and cold against him. He had built this company to help people, not to hurt them. And now, watching Ethan stand tall against the tide, John Cena knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. Ethan turned back to his workbench, his shoulders tight with barely contained fury. Carl stalked off, muttering threats under his breath. The day wasn't over, and neither was the fight. John Cena adjusted his cap, his mind racing. The truth was coming, and when it did, it would hit like a freight train. The air inside Hayes Auto Repair grew heavy as the afternoon dragged on, the hum of tools barely masking the tension simmering beneath the surface. Ethan Parker leaned against his workbench, his hands still trembling from the clash with Carl. He'd crossed a line again, and he knew it. Carl's threat echoed in his head. "You won't be working here much longer." Maybe that was true. Maybe it was time to walk away. But every time he thought about it, he saw the old man's grateful eyes, Sarah's shaky relief. Walking away felt like letting them down, and that burned worse than Carl's bullying. John Cena, still undercover as Jake Miller, watched from the edge of the bay, his clipboard forgotten in his lap. He'd been silent too long, letting the rot in his company fester while he played the observer. Ethan's defiance wasn't just a spark anymore. It was a fire, and it was spreading. John Cena's chest tightened with a mix of pride and shame. This kid, covered in grease and grit, was doing what he should have done years ago, standing up when it mattered. He couldn't sit back any longer. The garage doors rattled as a sleek sedan pulled in. Its driver stepped out with a clipped stride, a man in his 40s, dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. He clutched a folded receipt like it was a weapon. Carl, sensing fresh prey, swaggered forward, his usual smirk in place. "Something we can do for you?" The man, Daniel, slapped the receipt onto the counter. "I was here last week for a brake job. Paid over $600. Since then, my car's been grinding like hell. Took it to another shop, They said my rotors weren't replaced, even though you charged me for them. I want answers." Carl didn't flinch. His voice was smooth as oil. "Not possible. We do everything by the book. Maybe that other shop's lying to get your money." Daniel's eyes narrowed, his voice rising. "They showed me the rotors, they're old. I paid for new ones. What the hell happened?" Nearby, Ethan froze mid-task. His head snapped up, the pieces clicking into place. He'd suspected Carl of padding bills, but this was outright theft. He dropped his wrench, the clang echoing as he stepped closer to listen. Carl sighed, feigning exasperation. "Look, I don't know what they told you, but we don't cut corners. Maybe you misread the invoice." "I want my service records," Daniel demanded, tapping the receipt firmly. Now Carl's smirk faded, his tone hardening. "That's company info. We don't hand it out." Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. He stormed forward, his voice cutting through the garage like a blade. "That's a lie, Carl. He's got every right to see those records. You charged him for parts he never got. Admit it." Carl spun on him, his face flushing red. "Stay out of this, Parker. You're already on borrowed time." "No," Ethan snapped, stepping closer, his green eyes blazing. "I'm done staying out of it. You've been ripping people off for years. Overcharging, lying, pushing crap they don't need. That stops today." The other mechanics froze, their tools falling silent. Daniel's anger shifted into confusion as he looked between them. Carl's bravado flickered, but he doubled down, his voice low and venomous. "You're finished here, kid. Pack your stuff and get out." Before Ethan could respond, John Cena rose to his feet, his chair scraping the floor. He had seen enough, far more than enough. The guilt that had gnawed at him all day boiled over. He couldn't let Ethan take the fall for a mess he had allowed to grow. John Cena pulled off his grease-streaked cap and let it drop. He stepped forward. "That's not your call to make, Carl," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. Carl spun around, sneering. "Who the hell are you?" "John Cena," he cut him off. "I own this company. All 6 locations. And I've been here all day, watching you run this place like a scam." The garage fell silent, the weight of his words hitting hard. Carl blinked, color draining from his face. Ethan's jaw dropped. Daniel stepped back stunned. The other mechanics exchanged wide-eyed looks. John Cena turned to Daniel, his gaze steady. "You'll get your records. If you paid for new rotors and didn't get them, you'll get a full refund today. I'll personally look into what happened with your car." Daniel let out a breath, some of his anger fading. "That's all I wanted. Thank you." John Cena nodded, then faced Carl again, his voice dropping into a dangerous calm. "Got something to say?" Carl let out a hollow laugh. "This is a misunderstanding. Maybe one of the techs screwed up." "No," John Cena cut him off, sharp as a blade. "This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. I've watched you overcharge, lie, and bully customers. You're done." Carl's swagger collapsed. "You can't just fire me like this." "Yes, I can," John Cena said firmly. "And I am. Get out." The silence was heavy, electric. Carl's eyes darted, looking for a way out, but there was none. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, muttering curses. The garage doors slammed shut behind him, echoing like a gavel. John Cena turned to Ethan, who still looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "You okay?" Ethan nodded slowly, finding his voice. "Yeah, just didn't see that coming." John Cena's mouth twitched into a faint smile. "You've been doing the right thing all day. Helping that old man, standing up for Sarah, calling out Carl. That's why I'm here. I needed to see the truth, and you showed it to me." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process. "So, what now?" "Now we fix this," John Cena said, his tone resolute. "Starting with this shop. I need someone who cares. Someone who won't let people get taken advantage of. You up for running this place?" Ethan's breath caught, the weight of it hitting him hard. "Me? I've never." "You've already proven yourself," John Cena cut in. "I'll back you up. We'll turn this around together." Ethan met his gaze, a flicker of determination sparking in his chest. "Yeah, I'm in." John Cena clapped him on the shoulder, then glanced at the stunned mechanics. "Things are changing. If you've been honest, you're safe. If not, shape up or ship out." The message was crystal clear. The old ways were dead. As the shock settled, John Cena leaned closer to Ethan and said with a smirk, "Hey, if you're liking this story, how one honest guy can flip a whole system, stick around. Subscribe to the channel. We've got more coming and it's only getting better." Ethan smirked back, still reeling but steadying himself. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone in it. Carl was gone. Justice had landed a solid punch. And the garage was about to become something worth believing in. The garage felt different as the dust settled from Carl's exit, the silence heavier than the usual clatter of tools. Ethan Parker stood in the middle of the bay, his hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the spot where Carl had stormed out. The weight of John Cena's offer, running the shop, pressed down on him like a loaded engine block. He wasn't sure he was ready. 3 years of turning wrenches didn't make him a manager, but the fire in his gut told him he couldn't say no. Not after everything he had seen. Not after everything he had fought for. John Cena lingered near the counter, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He had shed the Jake Miller disguise completely, now standing taller, his presence commanding without effort. The mechanics shuffled back to their stations, throwing cautious glances at Ethan. They had heard John Cena's words, "You're up for running this place." And the shift in the air was undeniable. Ethan wasn't just the guy who fixed cars anymore. He was something else, something bigger. And it scared him as much as it fueled him. John Cena approached, his voice low but firm. "You're not in this alone, Ethan. I meant that. We're fixing this mess together." Ethan nodded, exhaling slowly. "I get it. But where do we even start? Carl's been running this place like his personal ATM for years. Customers got screwed, records are a mess, and half the guys here probably don't even know what honest work looks like anymore." John Cena pulled a clipboard from the counter, flipping through pages of service logs. "We start with the truth. I'm pulling records from the last 6 months. Every overcharge, every fake repair. We're making it right. Refunds, apologies, whatever it takes." Ethan's brows shot up. "That's going to cost a fortune." John Cena didn't flinch. His tone was unwavering. "That's the cost of doing what's right. I'd rather take the hit now than let this place keep bleeding people dry. You with me?" Ethan met John Cena's gaze, the doubt in his chest giving way to something solid. "Yeah, I'm with you." The next few hours passed in a stormy blur. John Cena and Ethan leaned over the records, cross-checking receipts with the parts inventory. The discrepancies screamed at them. Hundreds of dollars charged for rotors that had never left the shelf. Flushes billed when only a few drops of fluid were used. Each line was a punch to Ethan's gut, a reminder of how long he had worked under Carl's shadow, fixing cars while the real damage happened at the counter. He thought of Sarah, of old Daniel, and of how many others had walked away cheated, too tired or too broke to fight back. John Cena noticed the tightness in Ethan's jaw. "You're taking this personally, aren't you?" "Hard not to," Ethan muttered, tossing a pen onto the pile of papers. "I've been here 3 years watching Carl pull this crap. I should have spoken up sooner. Done more." "You did plenty," John Cena said, leaning back. "You helped that old man when no one else would. You told Sarah the truth when Carl just wanted her wallet. That's why you're here now. You didn't just see the problem, you acted." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, the words sinking in. He had always thought of himself as just a mechanic, someone who kept his head down and did the job. But John Cena saw something more, and now it was starting to make sense. Maybe he wasn't just fixing cars anymore. Maybe he was fixing something bigger. The next morning was cold and gray, but Ethan Parker arrived at Hayes Auto Repair with fire in his step. The garage was his now, a chance to rewrite its story. And he wasn't about to let it slip. John Cena was already there, leaning against his truck with a stack of files in hand. They had spent the night planning refunds, audits, a fresh start. Ethan unlocked the door, the clank of metal ringing with promise. He didn't see the storm coming. By mid-morning, a shadow darkened the bay. Carl Hayes stormed in, face twisted with rage, a phone clutched in his fist. "You think you can take this from me?" he roared, shoving the screen at Ethan. It was a smear campaign, online posts branding the shop a fraud, pinning years of Carl scams on Ethan and John Cena. "I've got friends who'll bury this place. You're finished." Ethan's heart sank. The accusations cut deeper than he expected. He had fought for honesty, and now it was being turned against him. John Cena stepped forward, calm and unshaken. "You're digging your own grave, Carl. Walk away." Carl laughed, bitter and wild. "I'll ruin you first." He snatched up a wrench and smashed it against a workbench, tools crashing to the floor. Mechanics froze, fear rippling through the garage. Ethan lunged, wrenching it from Carl's grip. "Enough," he shouted, his voice raw but firm. "You don't get to wreck this too." John Cena pulled out his phone, already dialing. "The cops are on their way. We've got evidence against you. Records, witnesses. This ends now." Sirens wailed in the distance. Carl's bravado cracked. He bolted, but it was too late. Police stormed in and cuffed him as he spat curses. John Cena handed over the files, proof of Carl's fraud, sealing his fate. The ex-manager's plot had backfired, exposing him instead. As the dust settled, Ethan stood tall. The garage was quiet but alive with new purpose. John Cena clapped his shoulder. "You held the line. That's what matters." Ethan nodded, a weight lifting. The shop wasn't just a business anymore. It was a beacon. Carl was gone, justice had won, and Ethan knew they would build something better, together. What strikes me most about Ethan and John Cena's story is how one person's courage can unravel an entire system of wrong. Ethan didn't have power or a plan, just a gut feeling that honesty matters more than profit. I think that's the struggle we all face. Do we stand up when it's hard, or do we let the Carls of the world win? Some might argue Ethan was reckless, risking his job for strangers. But I see it as strength, proof that justice starts small with us. John Cena's wake-up call reminds me that even the biggest figures can miss the mess below if they're not paying attention. What do you think? Does one honest act really change anything, or is it just noise? Thanks for sticking with this journey. Your thoughts mean a lot. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's keep this conversation going on the channel.